My name is Joshua K. Sabra Esquire, and with him as always, Dr. Miles Salisbury, and you're listening to the Miles Ahead podcast, the intersection between mental, physical, and spiritual health for those on the path of the warrior. Stay tuned. In this episode of the Miles Ahead podcast, we discuss how to create powerful, meaningful relationships with other men, what's missing in our environments to have those experiences, to create those relationships, and how to end the war with ourselves so that we can become a whole, powerful warrior. Stay tuned. Oh, yeah.
That's any good podcast to start out with.
That's right. All right, Miles. Today we've got a big conversation. I'm really excited to get into your message and the takeaways and your experience of the Connor Beaton retreat, which is
After action report, right?
after action report.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
AAR.
And what are you listening to this week as you come down from your high?
That's hilarious. So I was going to talk about this till mid podcast because it goes with the territory. But so I was listening to Fuck All because I was at a men's retreat. But when we were there, shout out to one of our facilitators, Michael Gay. He's amazing. He was playing during some of our breathing and like we're about to sit down or we're eating breakfast, lunch, dinner. He plays really nice, soft, like emotional inducing music, like explosions in the sky kind of stuff. But at one point, I think he wanted us to like get back to playfulness, and he played this song for us. Like we thought it was like, was this a mistake? Like usually it's like very soft music, and we look it up and he's kind of grooving and dancing. I never heard it before. It's kind of Tim Wilson, and the song's called "The Booty Man." Have you heard of it?
No.
We will link in the
Sick.
end to this song because it's fucking hilarious. It is so good. We were just dying. Connor was laughing. Everyone was laughing. It was good. So I've been listening to the Booty Man. It's like I looked it up as like songs from the 70s or something. I'd never heard this guy, and it's like, yeah, man, Tim Wilson will change your life. Like, and he did.
All right, the Booty Man. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'll play it. I'll play it for you.
All right, I'm already a fan. Okay, so you've got the Booty Man. I've been listening to the same, metal and metal informed stuff for the last week. I've been into listening to a lot more teaching podcasts. So I shared with you some of what I was listening to with teaching, coaching, how to be a thought leader, stuff like that. But nothing too crazy for Josh. Same old Bad Religion hovering around my playlist for the last week. So
You've been in metal land for a while.
yeah. Where else would you want to go? So you're thinking about booty, and I'm thinking about metal, and in the new dark ages. And so my question for you is, so the way that I wanted to format this interview for you, Miles, is because we're interviewing you on your experience at the Connor Beaton Men's Retreat. I'm going to let you set it up and frame it, but this is a the way that we're going to talk about this is also the way that I think it's good to handle any of your friends who come back from a life-changing experience, whether it's a retreat or a Burning Man or a Tony Robbins or something where they get all fired up, and they have this these ahas. They go through this personal spiritual journey that, you know, sounds insane to you if you're not there, and is like, you know, 2 parts cool, 2 parts woo woo, 1 part sort of FOMO, and it can be sometimes difficult to deal with these people when they get back. And but I'm going to come at it with curiosity, and I'm going to ask the kind of questions that I hope you ask of your friends when they go through things, so that one, you get more from their experience, and you get to connect on the humanity and the personal growth, and maybe some of the triumphs and tribulations that they went through, versus just sort of hearing about it as some like wild party that you missed out on or something like that. So this is also a little instructive to be uh, helpful for all of us who hopefully will get the chance to either go on these things like Miles did, and be friends with people who go on them, so that you can not be an asshole to them when they return. And try to relate. And oh yeah, I did drugs once. Cool.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I meditated once.
Yeah.
Badass, dude.
So
That's good.
so I'll play the part of the curious friend, and Miles will play the part of the person who just returned from the shaman with wild-eyed stories of other lands.
Yeah, the exorcism.
Right. So number one, so briefly as you can, describe or tell us about Connor Beaton and the work he's doing, and a little bit about his role in the space and what this retreat is about.
Fucking hell, man. That's going to take like a 4-part podcast if you really want me to go in depth. So I have to talk about this carefully, because I have to also hold people's confidentiality, and what I'm not going to talk about other people's processes. I'll just speak to my own. And I don't want to go into depth what happens there, because it might spoil your experience if you want to go on one of these retreats. Because if you already know what's going to happen, you might not be fully present. It's kind of like nice to be surprised, like, oh, this is what this is about. So I won't get into techniques and tips and tricks that they did per se, but only as it relates to my experience. And I'm still trying to figure out what happened. Michael, one of the facilitators, did leave a nice message on our WhatsApp group chat about being slow to share, because he's like, you might not have figured out like even 20 to 40% of what's happened to you yet. And I feel like, yeah, I think I'm at like 30, 35% right now. That holds true. So I've been sharing with some people, but slowly. So this will probably be the most in depth and prolonged period of time in one shot that I've shared. So if it comes out a little bit discombobulated, it's because I'm discombobulated, but in a good way. It was one of the most profound experiences I've ever had, and I've done some things, you know, been like month-long meditation retreats, lots of group work, lots of really hard, profound shit. And this topped that in like 4 days. We had 3 whole days together and 2 half days together. So I'm a big believer now, and it made me want to learn this work and do this work. And like, I was like, I want to join you. I want to join the team. Like, how do I join the team? Like, that was hard for me to put the therapist part of me down and be the one that gets to be healed. But that was kind of one of the reasons I went there, is like, I need to be healed. You know, I had to ride that line really carefully. I was really wanting to jump in and like help people. And I was like, no, that's their process, and these guys got this. This is not what you're supposed to be doing. I had to over and over stop myself from doing that, which is normal it's an occupational hazard. But if people ask me questions about my background and stuff, I'm always happy to share. But I didn't lead with that. I was reluctant to share at all that I was a therapist, and that I went to the same university as Michael did, and Dewey Freeman, who was meant to be there, but he got stuck in a snowstorm, and he sent his protege, which was Michael Gay, who was phenomenal. So we missed Dewey, but Michael was just as good. He was freaking amazing. I had met Dewey a long time ago at Naropa. He was a professor for a different track, psychological program in the same building as mine. And I remember I went into their office for something. I don't remember, but he was there and he just immediately started asking me questions. I was really curious. And I was like, who, this guy just connected with me like real quick. Like, I don't even know why he's talking to me, but it was super nice, super genuine. And I don't even remember what we talked about. I remember him being like, just like, I could sense the Yoda in him, it was really good. And I really wish he was, able to teach an hour program, but he was in the transpersonal counseling program, I think. And mine was the contemplative psychotherapy track, which is more the meditation, mindfulness space. Theirs was more like somatic body work, probably a bit of everything transpersonal. But so we didn't get him, but we got Michael, and he was just as good, and he did that program, and he's studied under Dewey, so he was great. And of course, Connor was amazing, and then Casey was great. It's hard to say his last name. It looks like it's Greek. Descharnais. Sorry, Casey. I connected with you deeply, and I can't say your last name correctly, but he was awesome too. He's a coach, and he's been working with Connor for a long time, and he was another one of the facilitators. When I talk about my process, he was a key player when we get there. But
So just from the outside, looking in, I met Miles probably the day after he got back and asked him a few questions, and it was like, it was like somebody who had done like a heroic dose of mushrooms, but was still sort of on them when I asked.
Yeah.
Because he was answering questions that were all over the place. He's like, yeah, we did this, and then I did that, and then I cried, and it's like, do you have a head injury? What happened?
Yeah, I got a TBI for sure.
And so he was discombobulated in a good way, and all over the place in his experience. But he started integrating this really quickly into his work because he started to show up differently and apply some of these skills that he learned to some of his practice, which I'm sure he'll share maybe more at the end of whenever the end of this conversation will be.
We'll see what happens.
But the tools are really valuable, and so I'm excited to figure out or to learn from you how you're applying this to yourself, how you're applying this to other people, and these lessons that are so important. But so this retreat was 3 days.
So it's we have 3 whole days together and then 2 half days. So a travel, get there, do work, and then do work, go travel home, if that makes sense. So yeah.
So you had 3 full days together, and Connor Beaton is a teacher and is he a counselor?
He's coach. He has the podcast Man Talks. Highly recommend for men and women, but especially for men. And then the great book, Men's Work, also phenomenal. I'm actually going to reread it, and he's got journal prompts and stuff at the end of each chapter. And I did them in my mind. I was lazy. And this time I'm like, I'm going to actually write them out and actually give them credit. I was kind of half-assing it. And after going through this retreat, I can see the benefit of journaling. And he has some really good journal prompt questions in the book. And he gave us his personal journal prompt questions, which we can probably share with you guys because he's shared it on his podcast before. I can do that at some point. And he said he answered a series of questions for, I think it was 90 days, and he said it completely changed his life.
So Connor Beaton is a coach and a podcaster, an influencer around the topic of men's mental health and spiritual health and wellness. And so he hosts these retreats to live out and take action on some of these principles and philosophies that he's sharing. Because as you just said, you can read it, you can intellectualize it, but until you practice it, it's not really happening. And then doing that work together with some facilitators takes it to the nth degree.
With other men, yes.
And it's so dramatic how much of a difference it makes when you go from like information gathering to living it. It's a completely different experience. And so you got to do that. You got to jump in all the way in the deep end through this process. So you go to this retreat, and then like I said, I've got some questions for you about it, but mostly they're pretty general and very, very specific to you. Um, what struck you? I mean, at a 50,000 foot level,
Mhm.
what struck you as significant in that? Oh, this isn't like what was present that you don't get to see in your everyday life? What was yeah? What were the most important things that he was able to include in this experience for you that you think is often overlooked or something that is just no one else is doing?
I think it busts the myth that men can't get together, bond real quickly, and work through hard shit. I think we've like historically or even prehistorically probably been able to do that, and modern living's just kicked it in the nut somewhere, and we just don't do it. And women, it's easy, acceptable. You can go get together and do whatever and talk about their feelings. Guys are like lonely, isolated, suffering in silence, got to hold the world on their shoulders, and they have no one to talk to. And if they do, it's probably a female, like their wife. Then they, crushing their wife because it's a lot for them to carry too. But and I know that I know this is possible because I've done it before, and I've seen it happen in my men's groups. But to be part of it for the first time was incredible, because when I was doing this training at Europa for group therapy, it was men and women, which is super intense and super good. But with just men, this was the first time I had got to be a part of it, not just watch it happen. And men, if it's in a safe space, safe container where everyone knows it's okay, and they're ready to go, they're ready to bring stuff to work through, and are vulnerable, open, and they just go for it, then you just see it, next person, next person, next person. And before you know it, we're getting deep, we're bonding, the group's getting very cohesive, and the facilitators, if they hold the space well, which they did, it just makes it even happen to more of a depth that it's just really hard to explain. You just kind of have to be there to really know what I'm talking about. So it's hard. This stuff is really hard to explain, but it was nice to be part of that process for the first time. Nice to witness.
Well, and what's powerful about that is like, you know, you said like men can bond emotionally very quickly, uh, except for it takes there's agreements that have to be in place for that to be able to be something that you can do, because you're punish there's a we unconsciously and we unconsciously punish each other for vulnerability in really subtle ways. So if I in like when I was younger, I had friends that if I revealed I had an emotion would taunt me,
Right.
right? Now that's like adolescent, and that's kind of obvious, but even in more subtle ways that we do this to each other as we get older is if Miles shares something painful with me, I give him a solution,
Right.
or I give him a fix, like there's
Right.
something wrong with them.
Right.
Like, I'm feeling lonely, or I'm feeling this, like, oh, go for a walk, call a friend. I mean, that's not dumb advice, but it's also not what he's needing at that moment. And so because of our unconscious behavior and lack of agreements and how we receive vulnerability, it doesn't, we get kind of these unconsciously punished over and over, and to where there's very few people that we want to be vulnerable around because we don't want to be fixed. We want to have a shared experience.
Bingo. And they called that contact, like connection, like contact, not sympathy. Oh, I'm so sorry. Like compassion, like suffering with, as James Hollis says, the Latin word compassio means to suffer with. That's exactly what that was. So we're contacting each other, we're feeling each other's pain, and something about that man's pain has something to teach me, and vice versa. And that's it. Yeah. And guys, we're taught to fix it. Yeah. But that's a heady thing, and it's sympathy, and it's like, oh, I care about you. Here's a 10-point plan, and we might already know what the 10-point plan is, but just me, like you sharing my experience with me, that's healing on a deeper level. And then listening to what that pain says in your body somatically, there's a different vocabulary, a different pre-verbal, even sometimes verbal message that comes out of that wounded space, rather than the stuff in your head, like in your ego. That's important. That helps explain to your brain what's going on in your body. But the wisdom in your body, like it happened to me in my experience. When I go into, I'll tell about it more. But like they would say, like say a statement from that space, like what's coming up for you in that part of your body. it was much different than I would have got from like logically thinking about it. It was like 7-year-old stuff, 7-year-old voices. It was very profound. So what you said is spot on. Like, it was all about making proper contact, not giving advice. I mean, it has some parts to play, but that's what we're taught to do as men, and we do it with our spouses and significant others all the time, unfortunately. And then they get mad at us, and we wonder why.
Well, you said a lot, and like we're going to get into it because I'm curious as to because I think you said advice has a part to play, and I would almost challenge you on that, because I think if you sit, even if you talk to that 7-year-old inside of you, if you let your inner wisdom come out, what wants to be heard, and there's also a truth. There's like an absolute truth of, what are you willing to, like, I think our inner wisdom kind of knows like what we need to change or what we need to say no to or yes to 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 create a different experience for ourselves and to make and to be authentic. And I think, I don't know that there's a lot of advice wrapped up in that, although you can definitely get some coaching. We can all get some coaching.
Yep.
What so you got this space where you are and everyone is given permission to be emotionally vulnerable, and there's no one's going to try and fix you. They're just going to be with you in that state that you're in. And that, because of that, the amount of, or you've sped up the time it usually takes to develop, meaningful friendships or meaningful relationships, because
Definitely.
you're stripping away the like, oh, do you like pickleball? I like pickleball.
Exactly.
And instead of giving a shit about any of that, what we really care about is, does the humanity in this person have any resemblance to the humanity in me? And
bingo.
And you're getting right to the heart of it. So then you're able to create more powerful connections faster. So that's just, I mean, that's a lot. So so you're in that place. Does that alone, well, obviously that alone creates a different experience, but then was there anything else in the environment that was useful in a way that you would point out as significant to further create, not just bonds, but also self-awareness?
I mean, in the setup of the environment?
Yeah, I mean, so like just from the 50,000 foot view, like,
Yeah.
would you say like, okay, so obviously we were on about men being able to connect in this way. What else is like strikes you as like a thing that is so clear that they brought into this experience that is not in your everyday experience?
One thing that was but really helpful was like the digital detox. Like, it was like, leave your phones in your room, or at least on the dinner table. Like, don't bring them into the group circle. And that was, I checked my phone a couple of times and like made sure the home unit was okay. Some people would have, conversations at night with their loved ones. That's fine. But like, no one was checking social media, really. No one was doing that. That was really a nice break. The physical environment, I was at a ranch in Texas on a river. It was like an hour and a half out of Dallas, but it looked like Austin. It was like lush and green. It's just super serene. And then the chef and the food was really good. We had great food every day. Like, all our needs were taken care of. So we could kind of we could just let all that shit go and just be held. You don't have to worry about all this extraneous stuff. And then a couple of us guys got up early and did runs in the morning. That was really helpful. We can sort of side process and what's going on for each other. That was good. You get to know your roommates if you had them. Some people got solo rooms. Some people got roommates. And I had two, and they're just solid dudes, or solid men, we should say. Some guy asked a question. I can't remember who it was in our group. He was like, "I noticed you don't say dude, man, guy to Connor." He's like, "Yeah, it's intentional." And he said something effective. He's seen so many men show up here and not know what the word to be a man feels like. He's like, they try that on, doesn't quite fit. Like, I am a man, and it kind of doesn't land. And I was like, yes, I feel some of that. I'm like, yeah, I'm a bro, I'm a dude, I'm a guy. Even sometimes boyish, like, sadly that still kind of fits. Not as much as it used to. But if I say I'm a man, it's like 50% true. And so he's sort of like wanting to get us to try that on more, like, what's that, man? So he would always say, give that man support or help that man in his process. It was always man, 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 man. I mean, I think it's called man talks. It's like, it's very intentional. So that was another part of the set and setting that was helpful. I don't know. As far as the above board view, I think Michael had some really nice smelling sage from time to time. That was good.
Well, so you glossed over two important things.
I'll probably gloss over plenty.
So the biggest one is creating a shared identity, like creating an identity that unifies everybody present. They identify as a man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was kind of the goal. Yeah, I guess. And then what is that? And what made that powerful for me is all three facilitators. For the first time in my life, I felt what a man could be like. It's usually like pile of mashed potatoes guy or toxic guy, right? We get the kind of extremes on that spectrum. I've never really felt what it's like to be in presence of a man who holds the masculine and feminine like very well, that yin and yang feeling. Like they did. It was like I got big brother, uncle, man kind of vibes from them the whole time. And it was like, yeah, this feels really, that's what that feels like. But it set off a cascade of internal projections on my part, which I'll talk about later. But that's also intentional as part of holding the space. They weren't like going to super validate someone, but they weren't going to like kick somebody in the teeth either. They're just kind of like, oh, thank you for sharing, that kind of thing. And they weren't going into therapy mode as much unless someone was going into their deep emotional process. And then there was a somatic experiencing thing that would happen with the group. Then it would be different. But if people were just sharing things around the circle and they'd ask questions about how was that, what did you experience, they would kind of just say thank you for sharing, or maybe ask a few follow-up questions, but they weren't trying to over-validate or under-validate, if that makes sense. So they held it well, and I was like, man, that's like a good mix of the yin and yang there.
Well, I love that because I would say most of us men don't have the experience
Correct.
of being around a man who is safe and accessible.
Keyword safe.
and this isn't a knock on any of the men in my life throughout the years, because you only get a part of your friends and mentors. You just get a piece of them, professionally or personally. And rarely do we have access to somebody who embodies those things. And so there's not even a honest reference point in most people's lives. And I think that's how we get so far off track. So these things like setting up a space where you're not trying to help or fix people, but you're showing up, setting up a space where the example, a healthy reference point that is the same for everyone at that moment. At that moment, everyone has a few reference points for what it is to be a man, exalted, and probably in stereo in this environment, from hosted by someone called Man, that calls their business Man Talks. That's important because they're supposed to be a caricature, so you can understand the characteristics a little bit more easily. In the military, the drill sergeant is a caricature of a soldier. They always have perfect boots. They always have perfect haircut. They're always awake. They're always, you never see them out of uniform. They don't sleep. They don't sleep in front of you. They don't have needs in front of you. They don't have canteens. They don't drink. They don't do anything except for coach you and teach you and whoop your ass and show you and educate you and pick you up when you fall down. There isn't anything aside from perfection allowed from the drill sergeant while they're in the boot camp experience or the basic training experience.
They're the North Star you're supposed to aspire to.
So it's always extremely clear what success looks like.
Correct.
So that's a very good intentional thing that they've done. And then the other thing you glossed over was just the digital detox. That in and of itself is going to create some bonds, because we crave connection, and you get this little dopamine. You get a little meth hit of connection when you get on social media or your phone.
Pseudo needs, as we called it at the retreat.
But you don't get. But if you're bereft of it, then you have to get it from your environment, and that just creates a ripe opportunity. as an aside, some actors were talking about working on set, and everyone's on their phone now. So you don't really develop, it's more difficult to develop friendships and good relationships in
At the studio.
when you're making a movie,
Yeah, yeah.
except for if you're working on a Tarantino film, because he
He takes it away.
doesn't allow phones on set.
Love it.
So everyone has to be present, and people, shocker, develop friendships, get married. Like all the human bonding occurs because they have to actually talk to each other, and then real relationships develop. And
that probably comes across in the acting big time.
Oh, well, everyone's present.
Yeah.
He wants the grips paying attention. He wants the cameraman paying attention. Can we do this better? Are we everyone on deck all the time? We go, go, go.
Down to the last man. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's about a unity of purpose. And so he demands it, and everybody wants to work on a Tarantino project so that, you get the buy-in. But it's a completely different experience. Whereas the studio next door, everyone's on their phone, they're having lunch with randos, and they're
NCIS shows and shit like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're just, it's fine. There's nothing phones are good or bad, but it creates a different experience. So you had this wonderful environment. So I know that you got a lot from it. So tell me about your takeaways. You said you only have 30 or 40% of it digested. So far, where's your head at with what you've taken away from this experience?
That's interesting to say ahead, because I'm trying to stay below the head.
Where's your heart at from what you've taken away from this experience?
What I've taken away is it's like just, I know this stuff, but actually practicing it's been a nice reminder. Men walking around, we're cut off at the head. Where we forget we have things below our head, unless we're in the gym. But that whole, like, for lack of better naming, chakra system, they didn't say chakra system, you call it energy, whatever. But, the body keeps the score through, of course, process through the brain, technicality. There are things in the body energetically that have information. So I've been staying with feeling more, and where I had my release, and where the somatic stuff happens, and where, Michael's pushing in on this one part of my I don't know, like upper lower chest belly area where the pain was. He was asking me when I was in my process. I don't know if this is going to just go into that. Right.
Go whatever you want.
So without giving away what happens, if someone's going through their process, like they're having a deep emotional release. I was crying so hard, snot was coming out of my nose, and the sounds coming out of my throat were like a kid's. So I hadn't cried like that since I was a kid. So I knew it was primal. And I watched other men go through this too. This sort of wailing, like very young. It was very moving and sad at the same time. You could see the trauma being released. And for me, like, everybody takes part in this experience, and I won't go too much about what they do, but it's more like somatic. They'll touch the places where you're feeling the pain. And Connor or Michael will say a statement, or they'll ask a question. And I had this deep pain in this, I don't know where it was in my belly. I was very sad and angry at the same time. And I think Connor asked me about, are there any images coming up? And for whatever reason, an umbilical cord came up. And that's in IFS, that's a trailhead. And that's the psyche's giving you an image for something. And he was like, do you know anything about your birth? And I was like, I know. I answered like I was born at 2 in the afternoon, I think. That's it. I know nothing about my birth. And I think he was trying to guess about any birth trauma, or like, did your parents even explain to you? No. What did come up is my dad said he did cry at my birth, but I've never seen my dad cry in my life. The last time I did was at that point when I was born, apparently. So that made me sad in this moment. I was just getting stuff out. But it was more like I brought into the room the heaviness of carrying responsibility of, when my parents divorced, of having to be the sort of man of the house to my mom. My dad was off. My mom was like falling apart. I had younger siblings. I didn't want them to get divorced. I think I've talked about this in previous podcasts. I don't want to go too much in depth to it, but it felt like I was carrying everything. And then, as I mentioned in a previous podcast, I become more aware of that. This was creeping into my work here as a psychotherapist, that I really had to carry the responsibility of healing people, or else I am bad, or bad things are going to happen. Chaos is going to happen. Stress, anxiety, heaviness, burden. And I wanted to heal that. And before I went into this process, I don't know what we were talking about. We were sitting in a circle, but I was just, someone had said something and I was just it was starting to come. Connor opened the floor. I was like, do any men need to get something out here? You know, and plenty of us did. And we raised our hands. And I didn't want to take up space. You know, it was that catch-22 because I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted to hold everybody, right? The very thing I wanted to come heal, I was starting to fucking do. And I was like, if I don't release, I'm going to beat the shit out of myself for not coming here all this way to release this pain. But I was like, but I can't go first. People have way worse pain than I do. They need to go before me. And something, that dam burst. And another man was going through his process a little bit over here. And Casey saw me. He beelined right to me. And the way he just like came up and like held me, like I was a younger brother or kid. I just like, it was, the floodgates just burst. And that's when we went into the process. And so this whole thing lasted like an hour. It felt like 3 minutes. It was bizarre. And every guy I asked said it felt the same, like it was really short. I was like, no, now it's like 55 minutes. Just time and space get bent. It's, you're doing deep work when that happens. So I get the umbilical cord image, and Connor says, like, I think you need to push off from your mother. You need to disconnect. You need to stop carrying the burden. And he had me push into the other guys and just yell. And it was so cathartic. And he's like, and now we're going to do again. And everyone's going to yell with you. And I was like, oh, my squad's here. Everyone just primal yell. And you can tell this is it was therapeutic for other men too. Other men were crying too. And that's what I'm saying is they were saying one man's pain is also helpful to you. Either resonates with you or has something to teach you. And that held true. I mean, did that a few times. And then there was another man who had a lot of dad energy there. And we had talked, and I kept telling him we got big dad energy. And I have another guy who makes t-shirts, and he's making a couple. And one's called, this is going to say BDE, big dad energy. It's pretty dope. But he knows who he is. I'm talking about right now. But when I was doing the pushing motion, when I opened my eyes, he was right there. And it was like coming out of the birth canal. And he was like going to catch me, like, oh, here's dad catching the baby. And it was so fucking healing. And he was tearing up, and it was like, we were all crying. And at the end of it, he kissed me on the forehead, and I lost my shit again because my dad's never kissed me on the forehead like that. And I was like, God, this is so fucking healing, man. Over and over. And so if that's resonating for anybody, like take that feeling that you're getting and times it by 1,000,000. Like when you go there, it's so transformational. I'm speaking to about 10% of what the process looks like, as I don't want to give it away.
Well, and I love what you're talking about, but have you had that experience of, when you were in a moment of transformation or crisis that your squad, as you put it, that your friends got to show up for you? Has that happened before in your life, or is this
right now? First truly true time in depth. I mean, I've had it in sports, a little bit in the Coast Guard Auxiliary, a little bit in like with friends. Yeah, I've had like one-on-one versions of that, but like sort of in a group mentality, just in the ready-made areas, that we go through in life, not like a group of guys that can do that. And I don't think anybody does really have that in society unless we have like a church or something where it's ready-made.
Well, I think, unfortunately, you're right. I think a lot of people don't get the kind of support they need when they need it. And, in that emotional way of just being held by your friends and not, them experiencing your situation and not handing you a beer,
Yeah.
because
True.
because like,
So tempting, but true.
Friends want to celebrate with you, and they don't want you to feel pain. So this is not knocking the people that handed me beers.
Correct. Yeah.
But it's not the same.
No, you're drowning out the pain that you need to feel.
Yeah, that's right.
The messenger.
Well, and you, like back to the whole advice monster.
Mm.
When someone's pains is coming up and you're trying to give them something, you're doing that to help yourself so you don't have to sit with somebody while they suffer. And because it's painful. It's not easy to be, a human having being a human observing someone's open wounds. It takes a lot out of them, out of us. Sorry. It takes a lot out of me to do that work. So I've got a lot of respect and
Mhm.
and love for all my fellow humans. Um,
You're so ready for this retreat, by the way.
Great.
You're so ready.
I'm I'm not fighting it, man.
Mhm.
I'm a hound for growth. But we're still talking about you before you try to heal the world. Um,
I fall into that trap easy.
so what was it? Because you mentioned your dharma of like trying to fix other people and trying to help other people, which is
Yeah, out of wounding, out of a fear of chaos, anxiety, stress, or I will be bad, or caregivers will distance themselves more because it must be my fault because kids can only blame themselves. They can't blame the caregiver because that would mean that they're dangerous, bad, whatever. They're going to go away more. So we just blame ourselves unconsciously, and maybe at a certain age consciously. I don't know, but that shit gets stored in the body, and that's what came out.
yeah. So what was it like being led for a few days and giving yourself over to the process and not trying to take control?
Good, a little shaky. I had to intentionally go there, but I had to remind myself that's why I was there. But I also wanted to sort of be, um, like the validation monster came out a lot because when I got that, the big dad energy from my cohort and from the facilitators, I sort of felt regressed, like childlike again for the first time in a long time. Just like I was acting weird, and I kept like having this pull to be like, I'm good enough, right? And you like me, and the things I've done in my life are cool, right? Like especially the facilitators, I wanted to know so much, but I wanted them to like me so much. I'm like, what am I doing? Like this, I'm acting like a little kid. My projections, I'm probably annoying the shit out of them. Um, Probably not. I mean, my questions were normal, but I felt like shaky and almost like, when you meet your heroes and you're afraid to talk to them. Like when I met Jocko, I completely dorked out, just fabulously dorked out. I word saladed the whole sentence. He was really nice, but I felt like I was going to do that, but I held it together. But that's them holding the space, right? They're not going to validate you. They're not going to like tell you to go away. They're just going to sit here and go, yeah, thanks for sharing. Yep. I love that. Yeah, that's great. They're very simple. So that was happening to me a lot. And I had a lot of energy, and I think when I get that, I got to do something with this energy. I got to be validated, or it's stressful. It's kid. I was pacing a lot. I couldn't sit down and go watch the river and the sun like a lot of guys could. And there was this big urge to use some sort of substance again. Like I thought I was sort of getting past that, and was like, you need like something to calm you down or something to distract and numb out. And I was like, oh, this is fascinating. I have to sit here. I can't run away. I can't numb out. I have to sit with my projections. This is what fucking facing your shit is like. This is what healing is like. So that's kind of what I was sitting with half the time, and after my process, that went down significantly because I let a lot out, but it was still floating around.
Well, I love the dichotomy of or the opposing forces of control and trust, because like I think a lot of men have the experience of having their ha- having the social contract violated fairly early on. Um,
Social contract being
like your mom and dad are going to take care of you and they're
right.
going to guide you, and you're going to fall down and they're going to help you back up. Most people, and after having conversations, you get in-depth conversations with people. I think, at least in our generation, most people like have this asinine experience of being referred to as the man of the house at like 7 or 8 or 11. when that has no context.
Zero.
And you've never had any example of what a man is supposed to be, except for, action movies, maybe.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
so
maybe that's
that
actually
alone
good.
is enough. Like, if you want an answer about why things are so fucked up, like just be called the man of the house at 8 years old, being raised by a mom who has the sole influence over you that you're now the caretaker for, that you've inherited apparently
And
from the world or whatever. So social contract is bereft so fast. So what happens is we start to take control and to fill the vacuum where we're just vulnerable and have no support. We just start to, try to earn approval through achievement. And, so our personality is crafted fairly early on this way. And if you're good at it, God help you, because that means you can keep it up for longer. And so here we are. So you, having stripped that away, you're regress right back to, being a kid. And then, and you're like allowed to refight that battle. And it sucks to just be vulnerable and open and trusting that you don't need control in a situation because they've created an environment where you don't necessarily need to have control. But it's still terrifying, especially since we rarely live completely in the moment, completely present and vulnerable. So then you're, as you said, you reach for your coping mechanisms, but they're not there. Luckily for you, they had a way of getting to the core, the root of your, trauma, and then start to untie those knots so that you can address it at the root and not necessarily fight the branches. But exciting, man. This is what life is about, because ultimately, from my experience, is like you can talk about healthy living all day long. You can talk about a meditation practice and like I want to drink less or I'm going to quit drinking, but you can quit drinking and you can still be an asshole. You can quit drinking. You can work out every day. You can meditate every day and still be completely absorbed with your bullshit story about why you are the way you are, and you make it everyone else's problem. You're just sober while you do it. Cool. That's awesome. But
dry run.
yeah, you're just a different kind of addict. You're addicted to the ego and not and not the substance. But I digress. So
I do all the time too.
being led, you're led. It's scary, right? Because it's not something that you get the opportunity to experience as very much as a man, as a human in this culture. So here we are. What um what else about that experience strikes you as novel? Actually, what I really wanted to know is like, what made it easy to let go then, and are you able to hold on to some of that vulnerability now, like the letting go part?
That's a tricky one because I want to cling to that experience, but I know that's the ego just wants to feel good. And that's going to sort of, it's like gripping water. It's just going to spurt out of my hand. So I'm trying not to hold on to it. I'm just trying to let it be there and remain in contact with the part of me that was releasing the pain. And I'll even push into that area in my body where I felt that, yesterday I had a lot of anxiety come up. I think, there's a strong pull to go back to the familiar self, as Dr. Dispenza talks about, like your old self. It really wants to go back to homeostasis. Your protectors in IFS, they want you to go back. They're like, whoa, we just went to places that we're not supposed to, because that's where all the fear and the bad in the shadow is. And so I had a surge of anxiety yesterday, and I think some of that was due to that, like a resurgence of it. You're letting it out now. Like there's a place for it to come out, but it was coming out like a geyser. And so I had to do a lot of like breathing and just trying not to do anything, because it was like, oh, then you got to be productive and you're getting behind and you got to do this and that, and all the way the world was starting to crush me again. And I was like, I am not going to do anything today. Maybe I'll read and write. I'm not going to do anything. And I'm just going to feel this. And it is terrible. And I really don't like feeling it. And this is where I usually move to numb out, but I didn't. And I just sat with it, walked with it, wrote about it. And I think that's the new move. And it's sort of like learning to re-regulate my nervous system. I get spun up real easy. It's just like as a kid. Like I remember life before the divorce and after the divorce, and it was like an explosion of like waking up from a good dream to a nightmare, where everything was always anxious. I was always trying to control shit, always trying to force outcomes. And they went into Dewey Freeman's attachment model, which was really good. And I think, when you're born, they're saying, 0 to 18 months, is my world okay? And 18 to 36 months, am I okay? Something got interrupted there because I feel like a lot of anxiety comes from those statements. But then after that's how much can I do and how well can I do it? That's right where the divorce happened. And that's always been an issue in my life, those statements. Like I can do some, but it always gets pulled back to fixing other people to get validated or whatnot. So there's just so much anxiety that would come up. We can get more into this attachment model later if we want to, but that's what came up. What do you want to say?
Oh, I would just I just acknowledging what you've already said and not not ripping through it, but the pull to have have what I will call them, coping mechanisms or compensatory behaviors to address this insecurity or fear of the ego being threatened, and getting to getting to change, but that changing that is scary. Like, who would you be if you were not always taking care of other people?
Yeah.
Would you be selfish? What does that look like? Is that bad? Is a self-interested person bad? Is it?
Or self-compassion.
Yeah, shut. Don't skip that part. You're skipping too far ahead of the lesson.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. We're building. Okay, gotcha. Take us through.
No. But the if you have these stories about who you are, I'm the person who takes care of mom.
Mhm.
I'm the person who carries the burden. I'm these things. To not do that is to threaten the identity that you already have.
Right.
Now, that it is an act of self-compassion to put those burdens down and to let go and let God. It's an act of compassion for you and for them, and we can intellectualize that all day long, as we always do, without having to do the work of living it. But when you go to do it, then the shit comes up. It's like, I think when people feel like, as a health coach, I watch people like start to do the things, and they start to get the results, and then their emotions start to come up, and like they start to lose their shit because two simultaneous things happen. What if I can live a healthy lifestyle and lose weight or build muscle or show up for myself the way I want, that threatens their old identity as being whatever it was before. And then there's also a simultaneous fear of what if I get everything I want, I'm still not happy, or what if I do everything right and it doesn't give me what I want? So there's this fear of success and fear of failure at the same time. But I think it's just change. It's just changing in general. But for you, so you're in there with that, back to this, like, I need to be productive. I need to, achieve more, do more. And that can be great if you're clear on what vision you're trying to breathe into life. But as a habit, like, I can't relax, I can't play video games, I can't, fuck off. That those acts of self-compassion are important. And so just sitting with that right now, you talk about the human development cycle and in these interrupted processes. So you're back there. Do you, yeah. So how do you heal that? Or is that something that's what you're working on right now?
That's what I'm working with. And that's why I think the somatic stuff is so important, because sometimes we have trauma or attachment wounds that happen. They're pre-verbal, so we don't really know how to put words to it because we didn't know what words were. We're like 1.5. Just no, yes, poop. So it's in the body, man. The body knows. So where does that show up in your body? What somatic sensations are you feeling? Is it an ache, a pain, a heaviness, a tightness? Are there emotions attached? What is that emotion? What does that want to say? What is it saying? Like, what is the felt sense? What is intuition? And it's hard to do that because we want to go to our heads, but that just let the mind sort of interpret what the body is saying. That's the new move. Because I think I bypass a lot with over intellectualizing what's going on.
Well, I think you just did. I think you just inverted the process.
Well,
right?
I have to explain it somehow. I can't just put my chest to the microphone.
Yeah, but another way to say it is the being present in your body and the sensations that come up have messages associated with them.
Yep.
And interrogating them to the interrogating is a strong word, but investigating.
Can't get the army out of you, totally.
We will extract the data we need.
You are in intel, so
whether they're ready or not, these fucking emotions will reveal the messages.
Waterbird,
who are you working for?
Exactly. Your fingernails are next.
But you address the sensation is the starting point. Now, but we don't experience that. A lot of times, like I'll feel rage or whatever, frustration or perseverating in a problem. But really, if I investigate down and follow the thread, it's actually there's an emotion in there that has caught me on loop. And and the messenger, we're trying to identify the messenger accurately.
Correct. Yeah, pulling the thread. That's a good way to talk about it, or unraveling the knot.
So let's end then with an exercise on how to do that, and then we'll take a pause for part 2 because we're just like
there's a lot.
Yeah, we're just barely scratching the surface here, and there's some fun stuff to get into. But so you're basically you're trying to break the cycle because you're in this pattern and like you said, how much can I do? How well can I do it? I need to achieve. Your identity is just a set of habit loops. If we want to get super neurological about it, and you feel them and you're in them, and so you're stopping. And so what's then? Let's like create a 3-step process that you can go through to sit and stop that when you have this whatever insert drive, right? So you have a craving or you have this desire or you're feeling this anxiety to be productive. So give us a
practice.
Yeah, just like a quick practice.
If I would integrate what I know with what I learned, and this is where my training would come in handy from Europa, is the noticing part, the mindfulness. Meditation is one of the single best ways to learn how to notice. If you can't notice shit unless you practice noticing, right? You can't do mindfulness unless you know how to concentrate. And meditation teaches you to try to go back to the breath and notice your thoughts and go, that's interesting, and back to the breath over and over. And after a while, there's sort of that sense of calm and more access to the deep self energy. And then that's getting to the somatic part. Like the interoception or interoception, as Dr. Human says, like what's going on inside me. That's the first step. The second step is once you're in there, like you said, pulling the thread, really feeling it or pushing into that part of your body, wherever that is, giving it a rub, whatever. What does it have to say? Does it have anything to say? Or what is it feeling? Was it listening? Just even if nothing's coming, just feeling it can be key. Another way to get at it that we did at the retreat is breath work.
Well, hold on. Let's go through that in real time.
Okay.
All right.
So Josh is getting into a quasi-meditative posture. His spine is straight. He can hold this position for a prolonged period of time and not have to move. He can move a little bit if he wants to. It doesn't matter as long as you can hold that position. He's taking belly breaths, long, slow, in and out through the nose. And this is a great exercise to calm your nervous system as well. I mean, the more you exhale, the longer you exhale, the more your nervous system will calm down. You'll activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Rest, digest, relax.
So I'm perseverating on, like, I'm feeling anxious about making phone calls. I've got a bunch of phone calls to make this afternoon.
So you already identified even the emotion.
Yeah.
All right. In your mind's eye, does it have a color?
Yeah, it's like red to light red.
And where in your torso or body, anywhere do you feel it?
Neck, chest.
Put your hands on those places. Both hands. It's right neck and top of chest. Okay. What does it feel like to make contact with those spots with your own hands?
Tight at first. I actually felt like restricted and pressure. And then
Mm-hmm.
as I breathe
into it. What would happen if you pushed into it a little bit more? Like you got it. Like you're holding it. Like you're its father figure now. You're its big brother. It's what it's needed. What happens when you do that?
felt tighter for a second and then warm and the tension started to dissipate over my neck and traps and chest.
So it fought you a little bit, and then it said, "Okay, I trust you." Perhaps. What happens if you sort of massage it and give it some love?
Feels good.
Feels good. Yeah, I think it likes that. Yeah. What is it saying to you right now? If it could say something, is there a knowing, or is it just a sensation?
So reticence to be held, and a reticence to let go,
Mm-hmm.
and a desire to let go.
A both and. That makes sense. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Two truths. Tension of the opposites, as Jung would say. But now you've made contact with that part of you. You formed a relationship with that part of you. And that's probably what that part's always wanted. Like, oh, there's someone else running the show here. I don't have to do it all on my own. This is kind of cool. And it'll come to trust you from your highest self that you can make the phone calls. Yeah. And maybe this part can do something different. We were doing some work in the retreat about inner critics. And Connor was talking about parts being loyal soldiers. And if you just repurpose their mission over time, they sometimes listen. So instead of beating me up, maybe you could be an advisor, or maybe you could notice my efforts. Ask it permission. Sometimes they're amenable to that. But that little mini exercise you just did it can be profound. And imagine doing something like that with a bunch of guys over days. I mean, it's just incredible.
Well, what you're doing is this is a great cliffhanger to end on, is you're ending the war. We're ending the war with ourselves. Like, instead of resisting all these little parts of ourselves, we're embracing them, so that the one, you're not fractured. I'm not fractured. When I integrate those fears and desires and those cries for help into my being, I'm not spending energy fighting them, and I'm recruiting them to work for the greater mission.
Mm-hmm.
So we end the civil war so that we can create unity and wholeness and successfully walk the path of the warrior.
There we go. Drop the inner battle. Yeah. Over time. All right. Well, we will let everybody integrate that one as they will. We've got more. I'm still integrating. So I'll have more for you. And we'll leave it at that for today. Anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Don't intellectualize this one. Practice and live a different truth.
Love it. All right. Until next time. We're out.
Peace.